All right. Hello, innovators. I am Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Nicolas Ramirez. He is the founder of Arkadia, the Modern Renaissance Academy, and Modern Activist. So thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast, a show by PolyInnovator. Please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hey guys, I'm so excited to be with you guys today. I'm excited to talk to Dustin. There's so much interesting things that we want to get along, and I hope you guys enjoy this podcast.
Polycast, actually, in this case, which might be interesting because you have a lot of Apple products. I actually hate Apple. Like I love Steve Jobs, but I hate Apple
Oh,
products. I
no
thought,
way.
and yeah, I thought that'd be kind of interesting, contentious topic at first because podcasting. The reason why people call it podcast is that back in the day it used to be called streamcasts or audiocasts, but people got so used to downloading into their iPods, people just shortened it to podcast, and then it just stuck ever since. And so it's like iPods is the reason why we call it, and I don't like that for one, but also with polymaths and multiple topics, multiple kinds of guests like yourself, or multiple series, there's a poly in the show, so like polycast makes more sense in this case.
Yeah, I like the idea of it, and I like how you can join the words. I personally like it, and I feel like that every single one in the audience will enjoy it as well.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. Yeah, maybe you could do an Arcadia cast, something like that.
I was really thinking, and I was thinking about doing a podcast, but it's gonna be more like the specific topics orientated. Like you're more diverse, and you're gonna have more people talking about specific things. But I was thinking about mine being about specific subjects for specific people.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's what you want to do usually is niche down. For me, like polymathy became like an anti-niche, if you will, and so I focused more
Yeah.
on the other topics. But totally, if you're going to start a show and you have a topic in mind, go for what topic you want. I had someone who was polymathic who literally had four shows. Instead of having all of the topics into one podcast, he had four different podcasts, and like so that's kind of like the polymathic way of going approaching like this different topics. But getting into the show here, something I like to do to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, I'm honestly an open book. There's so
That's what.
much. Oh, well, I can say that there's something that I enjoy Greek mythology. I'm a fan. And I usually don't share it with many people because when I share about Greek mythology, then there's a lot of conflict, like
Mm,
why, but there's and then it's like, is it a religion? Is it not? Is it a belief? Is it part of history? And there's just so many questions thrown at me. But I just like it because of how it founded most what's it called basis of
right.
moral and ethical stories.
Yeah, I've
And
always loved Greek mythology growing up, and it's one of those things that people misunderstand the idea of mythology. So, like, mythology is a collection of myths, especially one belonging to particular religious or cultural tradition. People think of myths as something that's not true, but it's just a collection of stories. That's all it really is. And so,
yeah,
whether you believe in a different religion or you believe in a different belief set doesn't really matter. It's just a collection of stories that you can learn from. And no matter what belief system you have, you can always open yourself up to other philosophies and mythology.
I know. And the thing is that you don't have to limit yourself to only one mythology. You can learn
Yeah.
about from Egyptian mythology, Norse mythology. Just they've been ancient and they always
Yeah.
been shared orally and have survived throughout history for a reason. They are part of social, like so as a social construct, and they are part of history. And that's why I personally love all of it.
Yeah, me too. I love learning from all of them. And when you do that too, when you take that polymathic approach to learn all of them, you start to see the similarities between them more so than the differences.
Even some of the mythology before have a lot of similarities with a lot of the religions now.
Great
There's
Flood,
there's a
for
lot of
example.
parallels. Yeah, that's a good one too. And even the teachings of even Jesus, I heard that they come from some of the Roman scripts or some of the Roman. They say that
Right.
even some were from Plato and Socrates. So it's just amazing to see how everything in the world is so interluded. That everything's connected, and I think that's just amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And who's your favorite Greek god or goddess?
Oh, Athena.
Athena.
hmm
She's good.
Or probably Prometheus. He's a Titan, you know, and he was the Titan that Zeus told to create the first humans. But he was punished due to sharing knowledge with us as a society. He was the one that brought the fire to us,
Yeah.
you know, and as a punishment, Zeus put him on a cliff, and he was destined for eternity for a bird. I believe, I don't remember the exact bird, but it will eat its liver for all eternity, every single day.
It's so
And
crazy.
I just love Prometheus. He sacrificed himself to share knowledge. And I live with that philosophy with me. I
Yeah.
feel like knowledge should be shared with everybody and it should not be suppressed by no one.
Right. Well, and that's one reason why I like doing these shows too, because you get to see the intersection of knowledge areas, and then new knowledge can form from that intersection. And we're
Okay.
sharing by talking right now. We're sharing our knowledge together, intersecting, creating something new.
Exactly. It's just, man,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
So, what are your principles in life? It's one of the first questions I have here.
You might think that's not a deep question, but as a person that enjoys philosophy, even asking "Who are you?" just puts me at a pause, and I'm like, "Oh God,"
That's
you know.
okay.
So I would say that my principle in life is to find our purpose. I see humans as a blank canvas. When we are born, we are seen as a blank canvas with no art, no painting, no picture. But as we start going through life, we start picking up different habits, different life views, different passions, different admirations. And for every single thing that we start enjoying, we start painting a picture. And at the end of our life, we're able to show that masterpiece to the world. I feel that we're our own art, but at the beginning of everything, we start as a black canvas and we're the artists. That's how I see it.
I love that. And I think too, one thing I always try to talk about is the micro and the macro. So the small and the big picture. And
Mhm.
when you were explaining that, it made me think the micro, like the single individual person is a blank canvas for their life and what you can do. But as a society too, there's so many things we can do that we don't even conceive of, like with smart cities or as a global civilization, that I think as a civilization too, like a global society, we are a blank canvas. There's
Yeah,
so much potential we can do. If you look at science fiction, there's so many different ways that they've gone about how we evolve as a species.
yeah.
And it's because we have so much potential.
But now the thing about humans is that we're so different but so alike at the same time
Yeah.
that that's where conflict theory comes into place. I believe that if the Karl Marx came with or he talked about it often. So conflict theory talks about as long as two communities have different beliefs, they will always collide against each other. So as long as there is difference in the world, there will be conflict. And that's something that we can't stop even as much as we want to.
And even if there's conflict, is there a way to surpass that conflict and still unite underneath something? Because we have all these different states in the US, for example, and so there is a differentiating factor between each state, despite the fact we're part of the same country. And so I wonder, like North Dakota and South Dakota hate each other, and yet like
Mhm.
that's the same. We're all the same. We're all part of U.S. civilization.
But that's the difference. Everybody is together or connected due to an authority. Everybody's a state on their own individual being, but we're all connected because we're as a nation, and that comes through a system of authority. That every single state is less than the nation. That's why we're still together. Or even a person. You can think the states as a person, and all the person combined comes as a community. And usually when a person does something wrong, they're casted away from that community, which leaves them to a point where they can't survive on their own. So even if they hate each other, it's a state of survival that keeps them in there. And that's the difference of why some people have to live with conflict because they are forced to.
Right. So moving on to this next part is that you created Arcadia, and it seems you are after this idea of creating a modern Renaissance academy. And I've actually interviewed similar-minded people, so I love talking about this. And I consider myself
Mhm.
even someone like a student of this academy. So what is your reasoning for creating it?
So I actually get a lot of inspiration from the Italian Renaissance. Usually the time periods with Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael. I feel like I'm naming the Ninja Turtles.
Claro,
So
yeah.
yeah, and I just like the inspiration because they weren't seen as a specific person to do a specific job, but they were their own their own being able to acquire so much knowledge that they found passion. For example, they weren't destined to just do one thing, but they were destined to do multiple things that they enjoyed. You know, they were able to not just be the best, but do something that you enjoy. There is something that I watched that when you go on a walk, you go on a walk because you enjoy it. You have good energy from it. It's not because you want to be the best of walking. And I feel like that can be also different with painting, writing. You don't have to be the best of it. But as long as you have a passion and an admiration for it, you'll always thrive in that area, and nobody can tell you otherwise that you're good or bad at it. So this entire idea of forming a renaissance is to be able to help people explore what they're good at and tap into that potential, which a lot of public schools don't do. They treat
Yeah.
every single student as a almost as if it was like an industrial product,
Cog in
because
the
that's
wheel.
what the system was based on. hmm That's literally what the system was based on. It was made in industrial revolution to be able to teach masses of kids to become or be employed by another person. And that has literally destroyed so much creativity and so much human potential. And with a Renaissance academy, I feel that we're going to be able to help people dip their feet into a pool of knowledge, and then they're going to be able to swim freely in that. So not only do I just want to have main courses, I want to talk about ethics, philosophy, and the application of those courses, because they teach us knowledge but without application, and that's the thing that bothers me the most.
Well, and you made a big point. In particular, the second industrial revolution is what really sparked this kind of specialist movement. And again, being cogs in the wheel. And you mentioned earlier that like the potential of a human being is being a blank canvas. But in this specialist society, it's like they're putting in that pool of knowledge, for example, they're taking that person, putting chains on that person, and telling them to swim forward in that pool of knowledge
Yeah.
with those chains on them. But again, with the more modern Renaissance Academy kind of base ideology, you take those chains off, you start them slow. I teach swimming, you teach surfing. It's one of those things where you have to start slow in some cases in order to get the ideas across before they physically can do something.
That's I like the idea that we're able to connect because not a lot of people see it. The prisoner doesn't think he's a prisoner because he doesn't see the outside, you know?
The cave in the
And
light.
I think very, exactly. And I think that's something very important. I feel like we live in such a society that it doesn't allow us to really experience ourselves because there's so much constructive enforcement on what to do. And if you don't do these certain things, you're destined for failure. And that is
Right.
something that we as a society have failed.
Well, and the other thing is you mentioned the Italian Renaissance. So at the beginning, micro and
hmm
macro, as a person, we have individual canvassing, and Da Vinci and Michelangelo, they all had their canvas and the way they wanted to. They had the internal drive and curiosity to paint their canvas the way they wanted to. But also, too, the reason why we see the Italian Renaissance as a Renaissance is because as a society, they opened up the canvas for people to paint their own pathways. There wasn't as much constriction on what could you could decide is a job, what you could get paid for, and what is worth money in a way. And so there was an open macro view of being a canvas in a society as a
Yeah.
whole, like you're trying to do with like this modern academy.
Yeah, but I'm not saying it's gonna be an easy road because there's a lot of
Oh,
people out there that don't want people to think by themselves.
yeah. What would be Arcadia's legacy in the future?
Honestly, I would love if it would free people from their chains of the world. I don't want Arcadia to be seen as a college or institution. I want it to be more seen as an open place, like a universal place that you go to acquire certain knowledge, or do you want to discover yourself? So, in I used to read about the Trojan War. It's actually one of the courses that I'm learning in my second semester. And back in the ancient times, there used to be just schools, but it wasn't where people were forced to attend to and acquire certain things. It was just a person offering knowledge, opening the doors for people that wanted to learn more, and then these people will or had the ability to branch out from there and welcome other schools. So I want Arcadia to have the same feeling of what knowledge was, what wisdom, what ambition of looking for that was. I don't want it to be felt like a workload. I don't want to discourage people to think that you have to do certain things in my academy to thrive. I would change how courses are taken. I would change how grading systems were taken because we can't put an individual score of who gets to be a better student than the other. Every single person is an individual, and not even no single system can tell you that you are good at a certain things because we told you so. So that's what I want from Arcadia to be.
And there's this whole idea of accreditation as well. I'm not sure if you were able to look on my website on the modular degree concept I've been working on the system, but essentially speaking, in video games, for example, there is these skill trees you would go past, and so each level of the skill tree will give you a new skill to use in a game. And
Mhm.
learning is a lot of the same way. When you're learning a new skill, you have to find a way to apply it. And so having this idea of a skill tree on a course, instead of having a linear system where you have this video, this book, this article, podcast, whatever you have to consume, then this one, and it's everyone follows that same path, you have a skill tree based course where you get to go down a different path anytime you feel like you need to change, or perhaps you need new knowledge in a different area in order to progress in that one path. And so beyond just the course itself, the actual degree system is modular and like that, where you get to choose your
Yeah,
own path and interleave the knowledge more. So it's similar to what you're saying there.
exactly. And I feel that every single person should have multiple chances to restart and look for themselves again. When you are in a college or you are in high school, it's very difficult to go back and study the things that you feel were necessary for you because you already advanced to the phase that you can't return because you already have been transcended by grades, by which courses were you taken. So if you were a student, you can't go back and relearn from your mistakes that were already committed. You can only do better from that point on. So that feels like it literally just pushes people onto a wall and it causes fear into the student. And the fear and pressure from academic application can be the worst thing that can happen to a human mind because you're
Yeah.
fearing knowledge and advancement. And it's the worst thing you can do to anybody.
Fear itself, too, is always a very scary concept to really focus on. And considering you're in school and working, you haven't been able to work on Arcadia for a hot minute. And so when do you think you'll be able to bring it back to life?
I'm honestly thinking that by this summer, I'm going to be able to focus more because right now I'm getting midterms, getting quizzes, getting tests, so much going on. And it's difficult with online school,
Yeah.
working. But now with the semester going to be over in a few months, I plan to really apply it more since I'm going to have more personal time to work on it. Because if I do it while I have work, then I'm going to become inconsistent. My creativity is not going to flow the same. There's going to be so much pressure from school, and I'm not really going to have the proper care for Arcadia that it needs, you know?
Yeah, it took me a while to get enough focus on PolyInnovator, for example. At some points, I would work 2 to 3 jobs just to be able to afford rent in order for me to come home to work on it. You know what I mean? And I didn't have school taking up
Yeah.
my time, so you could just replace the jobs with that. But again, like the level of focus and consistency is key. I found that consistency happens with practice too. So the more you can do, even if it's inconsistent, will help you get on the right track as well. But like waiting a few months might be a great idea.
Yeah, because I don't want to start up inconsistently,
Yeah.
you know? Because then I might be able to start right now, but then I don't have time because midterms are coming. And then I started getting 2 weeks. I just want to focus consistently from this time to this time. So I have everything planned and structured down for myself.
Right. Maybe you can use like Substack to create a blog or Sounder.fm to create a podcast or something like that. You could do something weekly that way.
Yeah, hopefully. That's what I'm planning to do in the future.
So we've mentioned education a bit, and the next question actually asks about secular education. So where do you see that going towards in the future? And what is it for some people who don't
Oh,
know?
I thought secular education has just something to do with outside of religion studies or religious teachings. So you're usually trying to find knowledge within human society. A lot of the times we tie science, language, literacy, poetry into religious aspects. So I don't want to say specific religion, but I will say it will be outside of our earth. It was almost like metaphysical. So it was out of our reach. And I feel like secular is more human interluded. It's more focused on what's happening here. And I think that's something that people should focus on. There's this thing that I read from some scripts that it says our responsibility as humans should be to bring heaven to earth, and that's something that we haven't even tried. And what they mean by that is to try to make society the best as possibly as we can. And that's something that I try to tell people what secular teaching is. Don't focus on what you can like it's not tangible. Focus on what's on your power and your limitations. That's my own definition of of secular teaching.
It makes me think of Stoicism, where there's a famous line where it's like, if you're facing a problem and you're stressing out about the problem, well, stressing out is not what you want to do as a Stoic. And so they ask the question, is there anything you can do about this situation? Yes? Well, then go and do it. No? Then there's no reason to be upset about it. If there's nothing you can do, then you should move on and try to find a way to keep moving on if you can.
It's interesting that you mentioned it because I'm a Stoic lawyer.
Yeah.
I love Marcus Aurelius. I'm actually reading a book. I actually have it right next to me. Is this one right here?
Yeah,
I
I
feel
saw that
that
the
you
other
will
day.
enjoy it. And it's actually about how Stoicism and cognitive therapy work together. It teaches you about what's out of your reach cannot be helped, but you can only control your emotions and your actions. And I think that's something that it should be applied to a lot of people. And a lot of people try to focus on things that cannot be changed by themselves. We should only focus about what's in our reach and what's good for us at that moment.
Right. And so you were pushing for secular education. What was your reasoning in your mind for pushing it forward?
I feel that people have become into pushing religions rather than understanding them. And that has become an issue worldwide.
Yeah.
A lot of people try to, I wouldn't say indoctrinate, but they focus so much into what is religion than why is religion. Like what is the purpose? Why was it constructed? Why is there a need for religion? People don't really ask these questions. They just tell you, for example, don't touch the fire because it's hot, or you have to do these teachings because we told you so. A lot of people don't really like to question a lot of things because their own community prohibits them from it. And I try to push secular questions as a skeptic. I'm not saying throw away your belief. I'm saying question your own beliefs. Question everything that you have ever known, and you will really find the pursuit of knowledge. That's why secular teaching has become a central point for me.
Yeah, it makes me think of Simon Sinek's Start With Why. People who are pushing religions are starting with the what, and then maybe how, but not even really touching on the why, versus the actual other way of approaching things. Actually, the Apple way of approaching things of all companies is to start with why and pushing things forward that way.
Yeah. That's why I enjoy philosophy. And I feel you as a polymath understand why asking questions, why understanding that knowledge is such a powerful tool that people forget the why of things. And that is such an important question to ask.
Well, and it makes sense too when it comes down to the idea of theology and science. And so, something I wanted to mention too is that I talked about principles with you. And one of my principles in life, well, basically my main one, is balance. So, again, with the Stoicism or Buddhism, balance is a key factor in a lot of those. And something I asked you ages ago during our first kind of correspondence, because I had a pre-show question about like principles and whatnot back then. But you mentioned the fight of science versus theology, and that's how
Mm.
I think that balance is key when it comes to those. But you kind of the fight of it's a little bit more important. So I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on the dichotomy?
Well, when I talk about theology, I'm talking about main religions versus science. There has always been a collide between traditional and progression. We can even look during the 1970s when contraceptives were starting to become popular. They were seen as an evil invention because it diminished the fruitful giving of life that was reproduction. You can also talk about abortion. You can also talk about certain specific scientific, or there's just so much coalition between each other. Have you heard about what's going on with stem cells?
Quite a bit, but I don't know what particular aspect you're going for, so please explain.
Sure. So usually when an egg is fertilized, it creates a type of stem cell, which the stem cell is able to create what we know as muscle tissue. Think about it
Oh,
almost like a black canvas as a cell.
yeah,
So it's
again, like
able to transform into different cells that create us as humans. But the thing is that the stem cells can only be artificially created by the union of an embryo and a sperm. It can be created once we've progressed past that stages.
yeah.
And from what I read about, I only have, I would say, surface level. I'm not very into detail, but this is like what's going on because of theology versus science. A lot of people are saying you're playing with nature, you're playing God, you know? That whole sentence, which is you're playing God, it has become such a powerful thing in our society because we're trying to control nature. We're trying to control things that aren't supposed to be controlled.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying where theology and science collide with each other. Because theology has always been able to what is in a natural world and how we express it in a spiritual way. So
Yeah.
when we break those limits and we break those barriers, that's when things become an issue. That's where science and theology collide.
Right. And it makes me think of the term pluripotent. So you mentioned how the stem cell is a blank canvas, and the pluripotent is a way of explaining how it can adapt to many different situations when it comes to what is needed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple terms that kind of that come before polymath, like multi-potentialite, or in my friend Perry's case, octo-potentialite, someone who has the potential to do many different things, or reaches out their hands in all the different cookie jars, like a jack of all trades kind of thing. And those people who are like that lead into polymaths. They indulge in that blank canvas and try to paint so many different kinds of strokes. And so it's interesting too that like as a person, they are like a stem cell person. They're a pluripotent in a way. And I think that when people look at the balance of philosophy or science and ideology or theology, if you will, there is that idea of why and how, the spirituality and the mentality of it. And finding the bridge between those two, I think is people who are more pluripotent, like us, are able to find that bridge more often, find that balance.
I 100% agree. I feel that people have turned themselves into a mentality that everything has to be secluded, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that this isn't supposed to be connected with this, that everything's a separate being. But once you realize everything in this world is connected, we just don't know how yet. And that's the entire thing of science. Science is to help you explain the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that religion is able to give you the almost I would say the why. Oh, the why we're here, why we were created, why was this made something that's not supposed to happen. A fight of morality, of ethics. Science just tells you the what is, just the facts of it, not
How?
what to do with those facts.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, it was just the how of it, how it just came to be,
Well,
and
and
it's I feel like those three questions always fight against each other: the what, the why, and the how.
and the who.
And the who, even the
Yeah.
who,
Right, but
always.
it's interesting too. And you mentioned that everything is connected. And speaking of it and everything connected, the internet is our way of connecting our tissue now. We've seen there's a
Mm.
rise of how social networks are formed and how we can build together and create new change through uniting on the internet. So where do you see the internet spawning that modern renaissance?
Oh, I feel that the internet has been the best thing that has happened to human society. Before, it was so hard to dip your hands into knowledge, and now people are so greedy and so ambitious and love to indulge that literally you're one click away to know everything you ever wanted. Do you want to know how to make some brownies?
Go look it
Here's
up.
this. Want to
Yeah.
learn? Look it up. Literally, look it up. Do you want to know what Stoicism is? Look it up. Want to become a polymath? Look it up. Do you want to become fit? Look it up. You have everything that human knowledge could offer for centuries, because we even have knowledge from decades or even eras ago that have been recorded and put into the internet for every single person to tap into. So I would say that the internet is the biggest polymath in the world.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because the idea of polymathy back in the Italian Renaissance was to be someone who knew everything. And I've had a lot of contentious conversations about the idea of knowing everything because back then there wasn't as many sciences, there wasn't as many outlooks of knowledge, there wasn't as many things to know. So knowing everything was a lot more possible, and people who were polymaths back then were discovering new things to know. Like Da Vinci figured out anatomy and the ocular science and how the eye works and light physics. He discovered
Mhm.
those things 500 years before scientists did, other scientists did. And it was just interesting how nowadays with the different diverges when it comes to like biotechnology or nanotechnology, computer science, data analysis. There's new fields that never existed before, and who knows there'll be more fields in the future. Now there's VR technology that we wouldn't have necessarily need to know about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to think about how knowing everything is almost impossible now, an omnimath, if you will. But being a polymath isn't necessarily knowing everything. It's more, I don't want to define it, but it's more about just doing things that are indulging that curiosity, knowing many different areas. But something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
Uh, mm,
That's why I didn't want to
that's
define it too
interesting.
much because I don't want to influence your thoughts.
I would say that a polymath, I feel everybody's a polymath. Every single individual is. Everybody has their work, but they also have their hobby or know certain things that other people don't. So I feel that everybody has a baby polymath that they just need to take care of. They don't really like to indulge or break from the chains of what is to be polymath, which is literally just to be you. And it's to pursue the things that you like. I love education, but I also love MMA, but I also love learning about how to cook. So why can I indulge in that knowledge? And
Right.
that just literally just by that definition, I'm already a polymath because I'm in the pursuit of multiple areas of knowledge.
Yeah.
Everything. We like to grab everything.
Yeah.
We're very greedy with knowledge.
So who is your polymath hero?
You already know it's my boy Marcus Aurelius. Every
Yeah.
single time I will choose him.
Well,
Hmm.
and it's interesting too because people who follow Stoicism may not see people like Marcus as a polymath, but to us, it's pretty obvious, pretty apparent that he is, especially when you look at
Yeah.
his history. And so I'm pretty cliche and I say that Leonardo da Vinci is my own, but I even did a presentation on him back
So
in seventh grade, and it's just one of those things where this has always been in my life. I wanted to tell you this earlier, actually. I haven't really told anybody this before, but my mom almost named me after a Ninja Turtle, particularly Leonardo. And so he happened to be my hero
no.
before I even knew that. And I wasn't named Leonardo, actually. I ended up being called Dustin. And I was like, I wish you would have chose that one. I would have loved it. Because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle was named after the famous artists, like the Leonardo or
Yeah.
Michelangelo. And so I was almost named after the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, Leonardo, which would have been the same as my hero, as Leonardo da Vinci. So I was like, why?
And the fact that you're able to connect it with it, you feel closer to that person. You know, when you learn about you have a role model. There's this thing that I was able to learn when you're connected with somebody, even a fictional character or a person from history books, you're able to see them as your model person that you want to strive to be. You have Leonardo da Vinci, and you will like to be almost as if he was your mentor. So you want to be a student of his. You have his records, you have documentaries, you have his art, and you would like to pursue what he was. But he was an artist at a core. He was an artist and he loved to invent. For me, Marcus Aurelius wasn't the best painter. He wasn't the best. He was not good in art, but he was a good leader and a good teacher. And that's what I strive to be. He had many other hobbies and pursuits of those things, but his main concentration was to teach and provide knowledge for people. And that is something that I personally look up.
It's a very astute answer, Nicholas. That's good. I like that.
Of course, man. Philosophy.
Yeah, speaking your language. So I guess this kind of leads to this next question here. What are some concepts you wish more people knew about?
Everything.
Everything.
Literally everything.
Yeah.
Everything. I as a fellow polymath, I would love to be. I wish people just knew everything about anything. But I would say that I would like if people knew the importance of finding yourself. Like I said from the beginning, finding your purpose. Not a lot of people think that they're born into this world without a purpose. But that's literally the whole point of it. We're supposed to give our life a purpose. Either if it's through art, if it's through music, if it's through education, or through religion.
Or
You
science.
give your life purpose or science. It could be whatever you want, as long as it fulfills you in the long term. And that is what something that I would want people to know. Find your own purpose. Don't tell people what your purpose is.
When I was going to mention this in the beginning, you kept saying purpose, and it made me think of finding your ikigai and finding your reason for being. Are you familiar with
Yeah.
ikigai?
No, but I
Okay.
know what is the term of it.
Yeah, so just for those who aren't aware, it's the Venn diagram of what you're good at, what you can provide to the world, what the world needs, and what you enjoy doing. And when you find that culmination of all four, that is your ikigai. So what you can get paid for essentially, and it's about
Wow.
finding your purpose. It's beautiful.
I'm definitely gonna look into that because now you just got me thinking. Because if
Yeah.
it's a whole diagram, you're able to visualize it and it's tangible, so you're able to see what you're looking for.
I actually made my own version of it for PolyInnovator. Maybe I can find that picture and send it to you.
Awesome, man. Go for it. I'm excited. Even after this whole thing, I'm excited to
Yeah.
go out there and just tell everybody, go into
Yeah.
this podcast, learn new
Yeah.
things, be yourself. It's just, I
Check out
just
the
love every single
podcast.
thing of it. Check out the
So,
podcast. Make it number one.
yes, please. How can we gain wisdom? It's a big question, but
Well, I would like to differentiate knowledge with wisdom. Knowledge is something that it's acquired, something that you're able to work through. And I think wisdom is the experience of that knowledge. I can spit out the knowledge that I've learned from a book, but the wisdom that comes from it is from years of experience and the circumstances that I've been thrown at. And I feel that knowledge is more like a tool, and wisdom is the fruit or the good of what's made with that tool. And that's the
yeah.
difference of what I see what knowledge and wisdom are.
It's like when you're teaching swimming, for example. I can teach the movements just fine, but the actual wisdom of how you hold your breath, how you stay calm, how do you keep going when you feel tired, that's wisdom, that's experience. You have to experience that yourself even before I could teach it to you. And so
Hmm.
oftentimes we'll make people do the basic movements to a certain point of breaking. Then I try to teach them why you shouldn't break, because it is a choice most of the time. There's a certain breaking point where that's not a choice, but it's usually extremely rare. But it's one of those things where pushing past that feeling like, hey, I need to breathe, I need to move, I need to get out of the water and get my head out so I can breathe
Yeah.
in. That's not a sensation that needs to be there. It just happens naturally because of our body, but it's something we can ignore or choose to postpone, as if you will.
I mean, also you can even look at it that wisdom is something subjective, while knowledge is something objective. You know,
Yeah.
I feel the wisdom can be different by other people or how it's perceived by yourself, but knowledge will always be the same thing. It doesn't matter who you are. Knowledge will always be objective to truth and the evidence, and wisdom is subjective to the experience of that person.
Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about how if Isaac Newton, didn't discover gravity, someone 50 years later might have done it too, or 100 years later. And we wouldn't have known Newton for what he did. We would know who that new person was. Science is something that's replicable, but art and philosophy is something that's subjective. It's something that changes for each
Mhm.
person. And so it's not something that the same person can come up with 100 years later, or something like that. It's not the same idea if someone else comes up with it.
I agree because the thing is that you can erase human history to its beginning, and art and scripture and language might not be the same, but objective truth like science will always be the same because it doesn't matter who discovers it; they will find that it is the exact same thing that it was discovered in a different reality. But poetry, art, anything that is subjective is different.
Small little tangent here. It makes me think of Halo. Have you ever played Halo?
I played Halo, but the first ones. I'm more of
Okay.
a Call of Duty type of guy.
Okay. Well, Halo has a really interesting story. Like, you only learn this outside of the games mainly, or if you play all the games. But essentially, humanity got reset. So, in ancient times, humanity was this wide, advanced, spacefaring species that got in a fight with another advanced species. But they lost the fight and they got reset back to the primitive ages. And when they went back to the modern era, like we are in now, which they were more advanced than we were before, they literally had to go through the same process over again and learning all the science over again and doing all these different things, all the
Oh,
philosophies that came about. I thought that was really cool. It reset the canvas, if you will.
oh, now I'm having this new philosophy, which is like the universe is a blank canvas, and you are able to interpret it however you want.
I already kind of
Yeah,
came
man.
up, I think, with the idea for the title of this episode too. The open canvas of a modern renaissance is what came to mind, and I was
Ooh, that
like,
one's really good.
yeah, I was like, I had
Yeah,
to write that down. So,
that
you
one's
study
really good.
philosophy and economics at uni, and what drove you to learn about those facets of knowledge?
I feel that philosophy is just being such a subjective thing that has helped me. How people have religion or spirituality, I have philosophy. Because when I have questions, I'm able to get answers by the perspective of others. I have understood that even as philosophy, it's still an academic thing that you can pursue. It's still philosophy still has a history, it still has role models, it still has teachers. But I like philosophy because it can be applicable to so many things. There's even there is economic philosophy, political philosophy, art philosophy, and many other things. And now with economics, it's more objective. When it comes to economics, I'm able to learn. I see it more as a science. I'm able to study it. I'm able to observe it. I'm able to have evidence. But the reason why I picked economics is because I like the idea how we only have a limited resources and what we do with those. So I think it's always how, like for example, two different people can have the same available resources, but what they do with those, it's dependent on themselves. And that's why I like to study economics. It's literally just studying of how to use scarce resources.
Yeah. Well, and economics can be transferred to many other areas of knowledge as well. It's a very transcontextual knowledge pool. And so I can't remember who I was talking to, but I think she was taking her economics degree and applying it towards like social, not social media, but a social network building, for example, and the economics of people and that kind of thing. And that's like the way you can apply economics to
Yeah.
other areas. It's insane. The scarcity of interpersonal connection or that kind of thing. Like when we were in the quarantine, people were starting to get more lonely and more depressed because we had a scarcity of connection and high
Yeah,
demand.
that's why I love economics. I love when things are able to be applied to so many things, you know. But I'm gonna be honest, I see economics more as a like a national or political way. How it can be with different things, but I'm probably gonna pursue financial economics in more like an analytical term.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna probably deal with banks and stuff like that. But my number one goal is always gonna be education,
Yeah.
always.
Makes sense. And so, how
Yeah.
I found you through the modern Renaissance terminology. Like, I think I was searching for that one day, and that's how I found Arcadia, then found you. So, what does it mean to you?
Hmm. What it means Arcadia to me, or the Renaissance terminology?
Yes.
I feel I feel the Renaissance is just how we experience everything. It's how we're able as a person to experience art, poetry. It's basically humans experiencing what humans created,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that's just a funny way. And a lot of people, they might see things like a phone and not really think of much, or a painting, not really think of much. But when it comes to Renaissance, it's an explosion of inventions, an explosion of art, because people are motivated of knowing more, doing more, having a more ambition. So when I think about Renaissance, I think it's almost like a golden age of human progression. So you can even apply it to different eras. But since the Italian Renaissance is mostly what is known, it's usually because it was an explosion of art and progression and innovation. We might see it sometime in the future, maybe.
Well, and I will say the Arab Renaissance in the Middle East, as well as some of the Asian Renaissance, as well as big no big happenings that have happened in our history, but people don't necessarily think about it as much. But there's something that we could learn more
Yeah,
about and share knowledge about. One of the reasons why I like creating content is that like Ada Lovelace was one of the first people who ever create the first modern definition of a computer. But most people don't know about her. Or Nikola Tesla, who discovered most of the electricity technology that we still use today. People attest
yeah,
to Edison, even though Edison's kind of a bad person. And so Tesla came first.
yeah.
Lovelace came first, for the most part. I mean, there was kind of a balance there when it came to Lovelace. But again, these are people that we wanted to exemplify and share those traits. And now with content, we can do that. And I would argue too, which you might actually agree, is that we're in a renaissance now. It's like we're, as some of the scientists will say, the fourth
Hmm.
industrial revolution, and we're seeing an explosion of innovation, an explosion of new ideas and new philosophies on how we approach life through technology, even or technocracy and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I personally, I'm so glad that I was born into this decade
Yeah.
or into this era, because I'm literally seeing innovation happen in front of my eyes. If you told somebody 100 years ago that we will have electric cars, they will tell you that there's no way.
Actually, that's not true.
Now we're
Real quick, the first electric
200
car
years ago.
well, 200. Okay, yeah, yeah. But 100 years ago, we had electric cars. Back in like the 1910s, 1920s, I think we had electric cars.
Oh,
Yeah, but like
oh, I had
the
no
automotive
idea.
industry suppressed it. Yeah, but please continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right. I mean, it's kind of obvious. Like capitalism has been very corrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they will always try to suppress progression for their own benefit. But in reality, like I say, someone that I really like is Elon Musk. But there's a lot of things with him, especially all the things that's happening with
Yeah.
the camps in Chile, the lithium batteries, the mining areas. It just sucks to see that somebody that I look up to could
Yeah.
be capable of those things. But I can judge him as a person, but I can also see that he's an innovator, that he's a person that wants to see progression. And you can see that with many evil people, even if you don't want to, they were able to push society forward at the cost of other things.
Well, and it's interesting too to think about how with technology, there's a lot of level of like supervillains, for example. Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, some people view them as, excuse me, supervillains because they have this true desire to push people forward and to like push technology forward. And so like there's this idea of like, hey, they're supervillains because they're building these big tech companies. Now Bezos might be considering his evil laugh that we've all heard him say. I don't know if you've seen
Oh,
him do his handset thing. There's a video of him just doing a supervillain laugh, which is kind of funny to mention. But they're progressing us forward. And one thing that Elon Musk motivates me is that he wants to see the world become a multi-planet species because we need to have that level of reassurance. If we have a mistake on Earth, we have another planet to be on to actually support human life.
yeah. And this is something that's gonna fit is probably gonna fit us in centuries, or I wouldn't say centuries, we might even see in decades, because how technology works is that it compounds. There's new technology that helps do new technology, and that time shortens. That's why from the last century we're able to see a boom in technology, because technology has been able to help the progression of that. And we don't know. We don't know what's gonna happen in 10 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, and
it's
let's
just so mind.
Yeah, it is mind blowing. And the idea of the
Yeah.
Moore's law, for example, is one reason why it has accelerated so much. Like the processors can get smaller and smaller, but we're actually reaching the end of Moore's law. Some processors now are like 4 nanometers across, like each cell of it, and that's insanely like ungodly small. And then the idea of just the exponentiality of technology and how we're growing as a species too. There was another idea I was going to share, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's just interesting how technology is limiting. Oh yeah, accelerants. So something I talked about a lot last year with guests was this idea of accelerants. COVID became an accelerant because of the changes that it made to society, forced us to start using Zoom more. It forced us to start using more online tools. Twitter and other companies went fully remote after the quarantine because they're like, hey, we can do this and our productivity actually increased. Let's stay this way. Screw being in an office and wasting money on that. So it changed business.
That's something wonderful that I like about humans. We're able to adapt. We're one of the most adaptive creatures on Earth. Maybe not biologically, but we are able to make resources and technology to help us adapt to situations. And that's something that nobody can replace,
Yeah.
because we as a species are unique on that.
I agree. And so, what sort of creation do you hope to add to the world? Is that Arcadia or something more?
Well, one is Arcadia, but my philosophy is that people should be open to experience their life how they want. It's more as I live my life, you live yours, as long as we're able to push society forward without hurting anybody. Because there's been times that we've been pushed forward at the cost of other things. And even it's that only Arcadia, but I also want to offer a new philosophy to life. It might be not Marcus's philosophy, it not might be Plato's, but I want it to be my own philosophy and a new cognitive connection of how philosophy in our psyche works, and how can that be applied as well.
Yeah, modern philosophy is something that's really interesting. We haven't had advancement in the world of philosophy for the past 100 years or so. There's very few people who could be considered philosophers over the past 100 years. And something I tried to create, which is just based off of old stuff, is the Four Pillars philosophy, where it's about the four major aspects of life: the mind, body, spirit, and emotions, which could be referred to Aristotle's philosophy on life, and or the four areas of yoga, or whatever kind of previous ideology you want to pull from. There's references to all of them, but the four pillars is supposed to be a modern take on it, so that way you can take a modern approach mentally in order to actually incorporate it into your life. So something like that might be what you're kind of alluding to too. It seems like.
That might be as well. But the thing about philosophy is that it's so subjective that it's so different for people. So it's not something you can grasp on. But now that you reminded me, there's actually something that I'm working in my college campus. And it's I wouldn't say a club, but it's almost like a program. And it's something that I was working with a friend, but since I had so many things caught up, I'm still repressing it because I'm in a different country, so it's
Yeah.
difficult to communicate. And it's actually called the New Genesis Society. And the New Genesis Society works on the basis of, I don't know if you know FDR or remind him from World War II. He was able to get us out of the, what's it called,
Yeah.
of the Great Depression. And he talked about how we can progress a society out of community. And what I try to do with the New Genesis Society is create a literal community, like a physical residential community that is able to have that same knowledge. I want to create a modern Rome. I know that takes a lot of capital, but that's
Yeah.
why I'm studying economics. I might be a dreamer or not be realistic, but I will push forward. It might not be me who does it. It might be my son, or it might be somebody else that picks up my idea. But I will be the one
Well, guess what?
that
Walt
starts it
Disney
up.
tried to do the same thing with Epcot. Not the Epcot in Disney World, but he tried to create a smart city back in the like almost 100 years ago, where it was like a circular city with advancements in technology and that kind of thing. And great minds think alike. My first endeavor before PolyInnovator was called the United Living Construct, which was meant to be a hub of innovation, but a new society, a seastead, if you will, too. I thought that there's not as much land to choose from, so we'll build it on the sea. But again, the same idea, push society forward, coming together with a new
Yeah.
city and a new way of living.
And that's something that people like us just like to focus, almost a utopia that we want for people to progress. But as much as it hurts us, there's so many people in the world that it's going to be so difficult to connect everybody. It might happen
Yeah.
down the line, but as how things are, there's always
Well,
going to
one
be
thing you said too, it
conflicts.
may not be us. It may be someone after us. Like I'm motivated by Da Vinci or Disney, and so maybe we'll be able to do it because they paved the way for us. But maybe we're only paving the way for the next person. We don't know, but that's okay because we're trying to push things forward. And if we help the next person do it, then we did our job. And have you heard of the Venus Project? So it's
I
again
have
another
not.
kind of new way of approaching uh, housing and society and community. And so Jack Fresco, who sadly passed a few years back, never got a chance to talk to him. He created the Venus Project with his significant other, and they were able to instill this new idea of a society and change the way economics and society works. So you should look that up too.
I should. Now that inspired me because I can look at it
Yeah,
almost as a blueprint to
I'll say,
progress in that. And maybe people like
yeah.
us can come
I'll
together.
send you the link and whatnot. But it's interesting too because just this whole idea of creating a new modern renaissance or a new society is not anything new per se, ironically. Like I said, Disney tried to come up with it, Jack Fresco tried to come up with it a couple decades ago, but people tried to do it back in the 1800s. Like people tried to make what is essentially a smart city back in like 1850. And it's crazy to think about that as a species. We've been trying to do this, but now with technology, we might be able to.
It might be possible now. But now that here's the thing. We might think it's a great idea, but now here's where conflict comes. We create a society that's made specifically for the progression of humanity. But now what about the outsiders? What about the people that want to come in? What about the people that want to take our resources? Now there's a lot of conflict involved with that. And we might be very dreamlike to think that everything's going to be perfect in that society, but it might not be the best for humanity. It might be best for that society, for humanity to progress. But we have to also remember that people want
Yeah.
what they can have. and it's going to be a fight
So,
of
what's
greed.
interesting is there's a video game that came out 15, 14 years ago called A Brink that literally did that exact thing, where they had a city that was super advanced and tried to push humanity forward, but there was people outside that city who wanted to get in. And so the whole game is the conflict between those two factions. So it's interesting how, like, hopefully you can maybe learn from that video game and try to alleviate the issues that they might have faced, and so we can move forward in some regard. But there's always, again, differences and conflict, but hopefully we can try to change that conflict to something less drastic.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, you can even see it. I mean, from Astro Boy. I don't know if you know Astro Boy, like the cartoon, but there was a city above Earth, or there was a city above Earth, and Earth was just became a trash hole of lost history, of lost culture, and people that lived down there wanted to go up into the cities that were created to save humanity.
Alita Battle Angel too.
So it's that one too. That's why I love topics like that. They're called sci-fi, but it takes into real problems we could come across in the
Right.
future.
Well, and we could keep going
Yeah,
on this
man.
topic, but I feel like we probably should move on just because there's other things we might want to talk about. But it is interesting to think about the future of society. And you created the Eden underscore official page. So I wanted to ask you, what is it for and where do you see it going? That's another endeavor you had worked on.
So Eden is actually like a predeterminant of what I wanted New Genesis Society to be. And it was more on like a civil activist club. So people would join and come together to fight things that were deemed immoral, I would say, to their perspective. But now that I see, it was more something that I did during high school. It was almost a failed attempt to create what I wanted. So it was, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but it was a learning
Yeah.
experience for me because I understood what didn't work for Eden, but what will work for New Genesis Society in the
I'm
future.
really curious to see how people listening in on this episode or watching the episode at various ages reacting to this. So I think that people who are younger than us, because we're both quite young, people who are younger than us might be motivated by our stoicism on our failures, for example. Like we both had endeavors that we wanted to create, but we failed at doing it. And that's okay, because again, it was a learning experience and we both learned a lot from it. And but people who are older than us might respect our wisdom on it or think of us as immature or something like that. Like, I'm just curious to think what other people would think about that. Because again, the United Living Construct was my similar endeavor where I tried to do it. I realized I wasn't good enough to make it, and that's okay. Like in order for me to actually improve, I had to realize that there was a problem with my level of knowledge, and so that's what pushed me to create PolyInnovator and this modular degree to learn something new and learn the way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people that try to go against our own beliefs and people that might question it. There's like, you're too dreamlike, you're not realistic. And I just feel that they don't really captivate what we're trying to achieve because we're not talking about what's happening now, but I feel that people should come together to try to focus on what's going to happen in the future. We're so focused in our selfish ways that what's happening right now, that even the actions that we do now that benefit us now are going to have consequences for the next
Yeah.
generations.
Plastic, for example.
And I feel that people have to realize that everything has consequences. Everything that we do today, me speaking to you, has consequences. It can be good, bad, or indifferent. And that's people something should know.
Well, and just for example, the delay in our call caused me to interrupt you, and if that caused a reaction to you, like you're very patient, you're obviously keeping yourself calm, but like let's say that by accident me interrupting you made you mad and you wanted to leave the call. That could have a consequence that way, or perhaps you're indifferent on it. You know that it's a situation that because of our delay, it's going to happen by accident. Like you interrupted me interrupting you. It's something that we both keep impatient on. There's nothing we can do much about it because there's that internet delay. But again, it's just an example of like, hey, actions have consequences.
It is, and that's a beautiful way to even describe Stoicism. We as humans experience different biological emotions: fear, hunger, disgust, happiness, sadness. But we have to be aware that they're emotions that we all feel. What we do after is something that we should really think about. So maybe the call ends and I would say I start getting frustrated and I'm like, I'm going to end the call. But before I get taken my emotions, I should use reason to solve what's going to happen after. And reason should be the first thing that people should use when making an action.
Because the emotional mind is the more primitive part of our minds, but we still have to respect our emotions and understand them. We can't control them per se. Like, there's some ways of doing it, but for the most part, we can't control our emotions. It's a matter of understanding and being empathetic to ourselves. That's where emotional intelligence comes in. You can't take that logical approach until you understand that you're actually feeling something. You know what I mean? There's some people who can't understand that they're
Yeah.
getting angry or getting sad or even getting happy. Some people get really happy and they don't even sense it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We forget that we're animals. At the end of the day, biological, we're animals. But the only things that makes us different from other species is our ability to reason, something they don't have. We're able to analyze our actions, analyze our consequences, and think of things subjectively. A lot of animals don't think subjectively. They only act on instincts to deliver an action that is objective for their own need of survival. Reproduction, killing,
Yeah.
defending, making a habitat for themselves. But we experience those things, but we also experience a state of constructive mind that we have gathered information and we're able to reason, analyze, and take action of those things.
And the actions we take are the choices that we make. And so, moving on to the next question here, I wanted to ask this before we ended up wrapping up. How do you think we can create a modern renaissance?
Restart the world and start from
Yeah,
zero. No.
press the reset button.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that everything starts in childhood. I think that as as we're kids, we're like a little sponge, and we're able to absorb social cues, understanding. We we're kids, so there's actually a paper that I'm writing about that I plan to release hopefully in the near future. It's about natural consciousness and constructive consciousness. So when we are born, we're already given a natural consciousness, which is how I stated how we're animals. We base our things on fear, disgust, innate feelings that we already have. But once we come to an age of childhood, we start coming with the idea of constructive psyche or constructive consciousness, where we're able to absorb information and create our own perspective on how things work. Now, this construction consciousness tells us what's good, what's bad, what things are right in the situation. Why should we forgive people? And that's how everything from there is just a collide between our natural consciousness and our constructed consciousness. And I feel that people should focus on the constructed part of childhood. And that's how our goal to make a renaissance, like a modern renaissance possible. It starts with the children. The children are the most important thing for our future. And we should teach them how it should be.
Well, and starting from the young age, but even just starting from the individual, again, the micro versus macro. In the ULC that I talked about earlier, that's the idea I try to talk about. Self-development becomes world unity. We change the world by changing the individuals. Or you can't really change people, but you can help teach them new things, and they'll change themselves along the path.
Yeah, I mean, there's this concept on anthropology, which is enculturation, that we are enculturated with ideas and perspective on how our society or community works or functions. Different communities or societies have a different type of enculturation. Some societies have this bias of two genders, others have three genders, others have multiple gods, others have singular gods. And it literally starts at childhood because when you're a kid, you're receiving so much information at the time, you're getting bombarded with so much knowledge that it just comes to that sense that you have to understand that there's more out there. And
Yeah.
kids should also come into intake that it's just not, you're not living just in that little tiny section of the world. There's more out there that you have to experience for yourself before you can come to your own conclusion.
Yeah, I love that. Traveling something that I really want to do. You've traveled more than I have, so I love that. And so, where can people find you online and kind of be able to connect with you?
I would say my Instagram. Usually on my Instagram, I'm posting a lot of stories. You might see in it that I talk about political issues. For people with article, I usually try to have a communication with my following. They come with ideas and then we discuss. Sometimes I try to do lives, but with the internet connection, it
Yeah, it's hard.
doesn't help.
Maybe you could
Yeah.
do pre-recorded and just upload it to IGTV.
That's true as well. I'm trying to find different ways.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to ideate after this call about that too. I have all three of your Instagrams that I've known about there. And what could be a call to actions for the audience for people to do?
Oh, stay tuned to every single podcast.
Yeah.
I'm also saying, try to follow people that you enjoy, and usually you learn things because you want to. Nobody's gonna force you to learn anything. As long as you have a motivation to be an individual and learn certain things, you should focus on people that you want to learn from, and that's how things should really be.
Yeah, I like that. Well, once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Nicolas Ramirez on the Polymath podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys.